Hi everyone, I'm Rushlock, this is Marvel Heroes, and we're going to look at Captain America Overview Powers post BUE, biggest update ever. Let's take a look here. As you know, we have two power trees to work with. So with Captain America, I've noticed that my rotation is pretty much identical to what it was before the update. Thematically, Captain, you could probably go like a shield tree or something, and the other one focus more on his hand-to-hand combat, but you see there's a bit of a mix between the two, and it seems fine. When you're leveling Captain America, you're going to unlock powers, every couple of levels. Up to level 30, then you unlock his SIG. So just try different powers out, see what works for you, see what's comfortable for you, find your own personal preferences for which powers you want to use. And then starting with level 32, we of course unlock the talents, but let's go over the traits real quick. So first trait, Patriotic Soldier. It buffs your serum powers by a third. His archetype is Fighter, telling you that he scales off of strength and or fighting. Next trait, Super Soldier Serum, explains his secondary resource, which is Serum. You see the little indicator here above your XP bar. This will explain how it works. Some abilities, build it up. Some abilities consume it. You also, the tooltip says that you get to apply Inspire to yourself and your allies, which reduces your spirit cost for your powers and increases your spirit generation. This will be relevant later on when we go through the rest of the talents, but keep in mind that this is on the tooltip here. The last trait is Vibranium Shield. This last trait is usually defensive-oriented. Shows you get a projectile reflection chance. Your archetype for defense is Tough. It shows that you scale off of defense and deflect stats. Also, as a melee character, you get an 8% damage reduction, apparently. Then we move on to the talents here. Our first row, our first choice is Combat Surge. For the build that I use currently, I like this one because it interacts with Vibranium Bash and Meteor Kick. It turns them into builders. So both of them will generate serum. Next option here is for Heroic Strike. Every third hit of Heroic Strike triggers Shield Swipe. Shows that it gives a damage hits, and Shield Bash will receive a 10% damage buff, but I don't use any of those powers on this particular build, so I overlook this one. Last option, Defensive Stance. When you use a serum power, your deflect chance goes up by 5% for 4 seconds, and then Shield Strike gains the following bonuses. It basically will it scales off of your deflect rating overall. But again, I don't use Shield Strike in this particular build, so I went with Combat Surge. For our next row here, we have Vibranium Feedback. This takes Indestructible Shield and adds the following buffs to it, which is a duration of extension of 2 seconds, and it changes the base 50% to a 90% reflect chance. Second option is Impenetrable. Again, it interacts with an Indestructible Shield. Takes the deflect chance up to 100%, but it increases the cooldown by a few seconds to 30%. And then it also has an automatic proc that if you drop below 1/3 health, it'll proc automatically, but it'll only do this one time per 30 seconds. And actually, I think I misspoke. I think it only, that 30-second cooldown only references the passive proc. The 24-second cooldown remains intact, as is by default. The final option here is Reflect Damage. Whenever you hit with a serum power, it'll reduce the cooldown of this ability, the Indestructible Shield. As you can see, all three of these interact with Indestructible Shield. Obviously, they're heavy-handedly telling you need to use this ability. It's a great ability. It's great for survivability, but on this particular option, you reduce the cooldown of it. It's 1 serum power per second for cooldown reduction, or a 2-to-1 ratio there, and then whenever you block a melee attack, you actually do damage back to the attacker. So I went with the middle option here, Impenetrable. I do like the automatic activation at 30% because you obviously need it at that point. You're going to need some kind of defensive buff. But it doesn't take away the active utility of the ability either. And I like the 100% deflect chance. So it isn't about it being the strongest, it's just the one that I personally prefer. You might find better performance in one of the other two. Try it out, see what you like to go with. Third row, start with Cutting Edge. So Shield Toss, Shield Bounce will gain a bleed called Internal Wound. It shows duration and damage type here. I personally love Shield Toss and Shield Bounce abilities. I don't use either in my current build, but if I were going to like prestige the character, or if I were running around with other people, maybe in like green content, I would probably shift out of them. I don't think Shield Toss or Shield Bounce is bad, but it's more useful when you're focused on content that's clearing a lot of trash mobs. Which in the future maybe that'll become more relevant. We'll come back and review it then. But I'm not using my current build, so it's not an assessment of there being bad powers. They're just, they don't fit my current rotation. Next option is Shield Surge. So you have Shield Toss and Shield Bounce again. They gain a buff for doing double damage. They also become serum powers. So they interact with the whole cooldown reduction ability when you use other serum powers. Last option here bases off of Torqued Shield Throw, which I actually use my F key here in my rotation. One I went with. It gets a 50% damage buff whenever it's used within 4 seconds of Meteor Kick, Star Spangled Strike, or Airborne Assault. All of those abilities are within my rotation, so this Torqued Shield Throw should always have the 50% damage bonus from this talent. Fourth row here, Serum Rush. Serum powers spend all available serum, gaining 5% damage per point spent. So here, you can see that I have 20 points. It's because of a option I went with here was for Reservoir of Strength. But if I had not done that, I would have 10 serum units available to me. So I could do up to 50% extra damage whenever I use one of my spenders. So whatever rotation you're using, if you find yourself having like an AoE builder and an AoE spender for serum, and then you also have a single target builder and a single target spender for serum, this would be a really good option. On this particular row, I'm not probably 100% certain which one I want to go with long term, but for now I've gone with the one that doubles my serum pool. I like to not have to pay close attention to it, which will lead us into our next option here for stabilized serum. You can actually remove the serum mechanic entirely as a secondary resource. And if you do that, your serum powers will get a 10% damage bonus, and their cooldowns will all be reduced by 2 seconds. This is going to be very, very much personal preference, so I highly recommend you try them all out and see what works best for you. See how you go from there. So the last row, Inspiration is the first one. Again, so this is one I was referring to earlier when we were looking at this trait here for Super Soldier Serum. I don't know if it's a tooltip error or what, because as far as I'm aware, you can't get 2 stack procs of Inspired. I did a little bit of testing, and without this talent, I still had Inspired from here. They're both based off of you being in combat, so it wasn't an in combat or out of combat situation. That first bit, I'm not sure of why that's there or how it works, but the second part is it turns Patriotic Taunt into Patriotic Speech. Patriotic Speech applies Empower to you and all your allies, so any veteran players who remember that from raiding days, you'll know how important Empowered is. Very much so in both single player and group content, as it gives you a very big 40% damage bonus spike for 5 seconds. It will also activate Patriotic Speech whenever you use your SIG. So it basically takes Patriotic Speech here, which has a Empowered buff, and you get Empowered whenever you use your SIG now. So it kind of rolls this ability into your SIG, which I find very, very useful. Going on to the next option, you can do Lead by Example. You apply Strengthen to your allies when you're in combat. So you get a 10% damage buff and a 10% crit hit rating multiplier at all times, as long as you're in combat. Patriotic Taunt gains the following effects. It'll apply a Quicken to you and your allies, which gives them a move speed, attack speed buff. But when we go here, it means you have to have Patriotic Speech actually on your bar. That's why for my build, I lean toward Inspiration, because it rolls it into my SIG, and I find that a lot more useful. And then finally we have Vigilance. It applies Guarded to you and your allies when you're in combat. So it's like a passive choice you can take here. Guarded will give you a health buff and health regen. Patriotic Taunt gains the following effects, which is Rapid Healing, which gives you, I believe, 60% of your HP over a 3-second duration, but again requires that you have Patriotic Speech on your bar. So if it's already on your bar, you're solid. You have the choice between these two here. I choose not to have it on my bar, so I put it into Inspiration here. It rolls it in. I get it Empowered. For me, this is the obvious choice, but if you already have Patriotic Speech on your bar somewhere, then one of these two become an option for you. Captain America's movement power is on your left. It's a sprint ability. Has a little bit of a charge up, then you move it, accelerated speed. Of course, everyone has the health mid kit, but that's everything for powers for Captain America. Hope you enjoy. As always, if you have questions, comments, if you'd like to share your feedback or if you want to share your build and discuss, feel free to post it in the comments down below the video. You can join us on the Discord Marvel channel as well. All of this will be linked down below the video. But have fun, and we'll see you all next time.